Hello and welcome to the Romance Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z and Morgan Brice. And spring is in the air. We are talking about spring love, tulips and kisses. And before we launch into that, I'd love our panelists to please introduce themselves, starting with you, Nancy.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books, and I write independently published romance, mostly romantic suspense, but also paranormal romance.
Ginny?
Hi, I'm Ginny Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books, as well as a ton of other stuff. I write under 7 pen names: Anita Ensall, Gemma Chase, J.C. Koch, G.J. Koch, A.E. Stanton, and somebody else, and I've forgotten because that's a lot of names. Most of what I write is, I write in every genre, and almost everything I write has romance in it, because I think that's a natural part of life and needs to be there.
Cool. Cynthia?
Hey, I'm Cynthia D'Alba, and I keep changing glasses and they're all reflecting, so I apologize. I write contemporary romance. I write as Cynthia D'Alba. I don't have any other names, so I thank God I don't have 7 names, because I had to practice writing the fake D'Alba for years till I got it right. So yeah, I can't have 7 names. I write contemporary romance. Right now I'm working on a couple of hot seal books, and I'm just going to mention that starting this Friday, my last book out, which came out in August last year, was Hot Seal Confirmed Bachelor, and it's going to be 99 cents for about 10 days. And then all the other books in that Hot Seal series is they're going to be dropped by $1, just as a little deal. So I'm working on 2 more Hot Seal books that will come out in July and August. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Okay, July and August. So anyway, that's who I am, and that's what I write. Just contemporary. I write a lot of cowboys, a lot of seals.
Nice. Angela?
Hi, I'm Angela Breen. I write romantic suspense, and that's it for now.
That works. Jeannie?
I'm Jeanne Adams. I write romantic suspense. I write paranormal romantic suspense. And even though it doesn't have, and I write urban fantasy with romance in it as well.
And I'm Gail Z and Morgan Brice. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, and many of those series have a strong undercurrent of romance, but probably only about 3% of the book, because people do need to do something else besides fight the bad guys. But as Morgan Brice, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, and that's much more 50-50 action, 50-50 loving, and really having a lot of fun with that. So let's talk about what do you enjoy the most about writing romance, and what do you think is the hardest part? Jeannie, gonna go around backwards.
Okay. Gosh, what do I write? I love the most. There's probably not much I don't like about it. I love getting people to fall in love. I love that moment of falling in love. I love how people adjust to each other and how they find each other where they are and like each other where they are. And that's just, it's just a wonderful headspace to be in, to create mayhem and murder and all the other things that I do. I do put them through unmitigated hell, which is also fun. I mean, what don't I like? I probably don't like plotting, but once I get going, I'm good.
And my sequence has just gotten reshuffled. Cynthia?
What I like the best is typing the words "the end," and writing is hard, and I think that I don't think I realized how hard it was when I started down this road. It's very hard, but I very much enjoy the readers, and that's really why I do it. I love meeting the readers that have enjoyed the worlds that came out of my brain, something I thought up, and they live. My characters are very real to me when I'm writing them. And sometimes I find this is the hard part. Sometimes when I get a book I write, like Hot Seal Confirmed Bachelor from last year, I didn't want to move on to the next book. You know how you talk about a book hangover, you've read a book and you have a book hangover and you're not really ready to read another book. I wasn't ready to write new characters. I really loved my characters. So I think the worst part is having to let them go because they're so real to me.
Mhm,
I'm having to walk away. You know what I mean?
mhm. And Ginny, I know we lost you there for a minute. The question was, what do you like the most about writing romance, and what do you think is the hardest part?
I like writing romance because I think romance is a part of life. So I feel like it makes whatever I'm working on more realistic because people, creatures, beings are allowed to have all the emotions, not just anger or rage or you know, the need to solve something. In the Alien series, I write very steamy, you know, level 5 sex scenes, and that is now becoming the hardest part because it's not hard to write them, but it is hard. I'm on book 17 in the series now. It is really hard with new places and new positions. It's a first person series, so you're only seeing what Kitty and her husband are doing, and you know they're very willing to be energetic and everything else, but you know there's only so many positions, there's only so many places, there's only so many ways, and trying to make it um, each time is get relationships. These are people that are, you know, doing the deed on the regular, and that has been. I didn't think, in, you know, by in book 5, I'm like, oh, this is still so great. And now it's 17. I'm like, I don't know where they're going to do it. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's going to go in there somewhere. But that's the sex part. So that to me, that's becoming the hardest part because just to make it, keep it fresh and interesting. The rest of it, I just think it makes your characters completely 3-dimensional. So I love
Mhm.
doing that.
How about you, Angela?
My favorite part is exploring different concepts and situations. So my first book, What's in a Name, the main character, Rachel, is stalked by a serial killer. So that was fun for me, not for her. But I just really like that kind of the ability to explore kind of my fears with my romantic suspense. But I also really enjoy building the romantic relationships. And I agree with Cynthia. I think the hardest part is probably letting the characters go because I have a series of standalones, which I really like because then you get to move on to something new and exciting, but at the same time, you have to say goodbye. So, yeah, I agree with that.
Nancy?
I really like the part of the story where you help the hero and the heroine get past the baggage they bring into the relationship. I mean, I know not everybody likes a romance with an outer plot as well as an inner conflict. You know, we all like what we like. I like both. And so I enjoy building that background for them, the reason they can't be together in chapter 1, and help them get together before the end. And I also like building worlds. I mean, the books that are on the capital danger, that little section there, those are all international spies. And the fun of that is international spies can go anywhere. I can put them anywhere in DC or in a small town or in the countryside of Shropshire. And so I really like building their specific world and finding about the places that they're walking through. Jeannie and I together write a science fiction mystery series, and building the world for that was a lot of fun. But so far we don't have any romance in it, so it's not really relevant to tonight's conversation. But for me, the hardest part is getting the emotional tone just right when you come to that crisis where they have to confront the things that are keeping them apart. It's such an important part of the book, and I really sweat over it. I don't ordinarily have to let my characters go because I tend to write series where the same characters pop up over and over again. But the Capital Danger and its siblings actually have very little overlap of characters. But I kind of lie to myself and say, well, you know, you're going to see them in a few books down the road, so you're not really letting them go. But I agree that it's hard. I just finished up my historical fantasy trilogy. It's in the pipeline in production now. And I've lived with these characters in my head for years. And when I wrote the last scene, I sat at the computer and wept. And I went into my husband and because I was, and he's like, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And I said, "I wrote the last scene." And he kind of looked at me like, "Okay, well, it'll be all right." I mean, what is he supposed to say to that? It's like, so it is hard, but I just managed not to have to do it a lot.
Yeah, and I also write, I have 5 different series as Morgan Brice, and then 4 other modern series as Gail. And I deal with not letting characters go because they overlap with all the other series, and all my modern characters show up in all the other characters' books and play different roles. And I tend to have established couples in my romance series. So for me, the fun with that is, yes, I love writing that initial meet cute and getting that couple together with that thrill of infatuation. But the hard part comes after the infatuation stage, where now they're in this for the long haul, married or not, and they're trying to figure out how to live with each other and how not to kill each other and how to adapt to each other. And that to me is where a lot of the spice is, because they've got so much baggage to deal with and so much unpacking to do and growth. And so I really enjoy that. I also enjoy kind of sending a message that life doesn't quit being interesting just because you got married. Oops, on to the next story because you're boring now. How about letting the married couple have hot sex and big adventures and be exciting and have each other's back? I really like that. I used to like the TV shows like Heart to Heart, where they would go off and do things together, crime busting, Nick and Nora, all of that stuff. I think the hardest part is, well, besides trying to keep track of who's had what kind of sex in which book so you don't duplicate, switch it up somehow. But I think it's really coming up, thinking through their backstories and making sure that you're coming up with a 3-dimensional person who has all the right motivation and is different and interesting and layered, so that there is room to explore and find out things, not just in this book, but going forward when they show up in future books in their series or as a crossover person who shows up in other series. So all of those things. When did you know that you wanted to become a romance writer? Angela? Or what got you into it? If you can come at it either way or both.
When I was 14, I read my first romance book and I was hooked from then on. For a long time, I actually resisted writing, though. I always had romance. I have another pen name, and I have romance in those books, but I kind of resisted it because I kind of let the stigma get to me, even though I enjoyed reading them and thought, people who read romance were really cool. So at some point, I think it was probably like 4 or 5 years into my writing journey, I was like, screw it. This is what I want to do. This is where the fun is for me. I'm going to do it. And I created Angela Breen, and I have not regretted a minute of it.
Cynthia?
This was not my idea. Now, I have read my whole life. And in fact, I just tore down my parents' old house and I went through all the old books from my childhood, and I found Trixie Belden, and
Yes.
I found Diane Parker and Annette Funicello. They're all mysteries. So you'd think I'd write mysteries, but I've always been a reader, is my point. And so my husband, after I retired, I read about 1,000 books one year. I kid you not. I was going through a used bookstore. I do 14 a week. And he said, I bet you could write one of those books after reading all those. And I said, oh, how hard can this be? Sure. So I tried it, and it's so much harder than I thought it would be. So it was his idea, but I write, and I remember the decision. It was after finishing a Susan Elizabeth Phillips book, and I shut it up. And I thought, if I could give somebody as much joy as she just gave me, that would make my life so happy. And so that was my my diving board, was her, from that one book. And of course I've read all of her books, but I just remember that one book thinking, oh, if I could do this. And so when Philip suggested, I said, well, yeah, I'll try it. So that's how I got started. I've never been intimidated or embarrassed about writing romance. Mostly I flaunt it in people's faces that try to make me feel embarrassed that I write romance. I remember after I got my doctorate, running into one of my old fellow doctoral students, and we were at a writing conference, and he's like, what are you writing? And I said, oh, I write romance. And he's kind of sneered, looked down his nose, and he said, well, I write literature. Why don't you write literature? And I said, well, I really wanted to make some money at this. So that was my reply. And he swallowed his tongue, walked off, hadn't seen him since. So, you know, I do it because I write what I want to read. I write what I enjoy reading. And I mostly do it for me. But it was my husband's idea. It was never my idea. It never occurred to me as a child or in college or my formative years, 20s, 30s, 40s. I didn't start writing till I was into my 50s. And so you're never too late, but it never dawned to me. And had he not said those words, I might not have. So that's how I ended up writing.
Cool. Jenny? Jenny?
Like, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I can hear you. Okay, great. I started out, my first love was mysteries. I read every mystery known to mankind, including Trixie Belden. Yeah. And then I moved on to horror, and then I was biography and autobiography and fantasy, science fiction. And in there, I did a little gothic romance. But they, like comic books, which was something else I really liked, romances weren't allowed in the house. Neither were Westerns. Okay. Because they were all pulp, according to mother and grandma. So I was trash. And so my cousin kind of snuck me a couple of romances, and I was able to like get in my college library. I could get in, and that's where I got the Gothics, and I liked them, but mysteries were really my thing. And then when I finally started writing, when the voices in my head got too loud, and I just started writing down, it was a novel set in the Old West, and that's what I thought I was going to do. But I learned to write on that novel, so that took a while. And once I actually learned how to write, what happens is that pretty much no matter what I'm trying to do, about 75% of what I write comes out of science fiction. But everything has a mystery, whether it's a big mystery or a small mystery, as like the bones of the house. And there's almost always romance in it, because I think that makes you a full person, or a full character. So the characters, there's romance, and sometimes one of the characters will sidle up and share that he is not actually just a sidekick, he is actually the hero and the love interest, and maybe I should fix things up, which has happened more than I like to admit. But to me, it just makes the characters better. It makes whatever story I'm writing more real. Even if I'm writing about people on, aliens on another planet, they're more real if they have relationships and love each other or love other people in some kind of way. So that's why it comes out. So I never had any literary aspirations, because I find most literature boring. I like action, I like genre, and so I never wanted to go that route. But it's just I don't write anything. I have almost no straight novels where I'm not crossing genres. So there's always romance, there's always mystery, and then there's the main thing, whatever it might be.
Jeannie?
Oh gosh. Well, my father was a librarian and my mother was an English teacher.
Oh wow.
So I started with books before I could walk. And mother used to say we were all born with books in our hands, which I kept thinking was very uncomfortable. And I had the benefit and the joy of really literally nothing was forbidden. We could have comic books. They didn't care as long as we read. And as the youngest of four, they didn't police my reading very much, which probably is, I still appreciate it. I'm not sure that they would not have some white hair thinking about some of the stuff I read at 8 and 9 and 10, but I mostly read science fiction and fantasy. I read Westerns, I read adventure. I read a lot of spy novels, lots and lots of spy novels. And then I went to work for B. Dalton Booksellers. Anybody remember them?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I was the low man on the totem pole. And guess what the low man on the totem pole got to do? Shelve the romance section. And why did the low man on the totem pole get this job? Because the romance section sold like this. So the
Mhm.
shelves were always in mass disarray because people would come in and buy 12 and 15 Harlequins and silhouettes. And so the books would be all tilted over and everything, and everybody hated it. And I thought, all right, fine, great, wonderful. But I had not read a romance because science fiction chick, right? So some people in the viewing audience may not know, but book vendors back in the day, if they had books that went too long on the shelf, or there was like with Harlequin where there was the July series or the August series, they would strip the covers off. And during our breaks, we could read those strip covers. They couldn't leave the premises, but we could read them in the back room on our breaks. So I thought, this is my section now. I better figure out what this is all about. So I read, in the space of a week, I read like a Barbara Cartland, a silhouette that was Nora Roberts. And wow, was that just a great introduction to the universe. And something set in the Pacific Northwest. And I liked all three of them. So I thought, okay, I get a discount. I'll buy some more of this author and that author. And so that sort of started me on it, reading it. And I had always wanted to write, but the one thing my parents did say was like, don't quit your day job and don't become a writer. Because they don't get paid. They can't make the mortgage. So I did it under the covers in secret for a while. And then finally I was just like, screw it. What the heck? I'm doing it. And yeah, that's what I started. And I never, Jenny, you said this and it kind of laughed to myself because I can't write a book without blood on the pavement and a love story. So romantic suspense is a really good fit for me.
Yeah.
Long
Nancy?
answer to a short question.
No, that's fine.
Well, I actually got into writing because of fan fiction, Legion of Superheroes fan fiction. And there was romance in about 90 to 95% of what I wrote. And I was in an amateur press alliance, which is kind of like a giant chain letter for adults. And the people liked what I wrote. And they said, well, you should think about writing something you can put out into the world. Because at this point, AO3 was not even an idea. There was nothing like that. Internet message boards, no. We sent in multiple copies to a central mailer who collated them into sets and mailed a set to everybody. This was a slow and tedious process that involved a lot of either mimeographing or Xeroxing, one or the other. But that's kind of how I started writing. And my first two manuscripts were traditional fantasy, but there was romance in them. And then a friend of mine joined Romance Writers of America. And she kept saying, you could really learn a lot if you would join RWA and you write a bunch of romance anyway. I don't understand why you're not. And as a teenager, I read a lot of young adult romance. Janet Lambert, Lenora Mattingly Weaver, Beanie Malone. I read Nancy Drew too. And so I kind of started looking into it. And then I met Nancy Knight at DragonCon. And if you have not met Nancy Knight, she is the apostle of Georgia romance writers. And she knows almost everything and almost everyone. And so we ended up having pizza in the food court. And she was saying, well, you should join Georgia romance writers. You would learn a lot. So I ended up going to Moonlight and Magnolias. And at that point, kind of, I was hooked. So I've come to realize that while it's fun to write the science fiction that Gini and I do, because you don't have to do that emotional arc. You can if you want to, but if you just want to write stuff blowing up and people getting in and out of trouble, that's fine too. But I'm always going to come back to romance because I can't remember who said it a little while ago, but it does raise the stakes. It raises the character's investment. And that happy ending when people overcome their inner demons, which I think are sometimes harder to overcome than external problems, is such a satisfying moment to create that. So that's I kind of came into it roundabout and backed in, but now I'm hooked.
Absolutely. I mean, I've always enjoyed having that romantic arc, even if it was a minor part of the, especially the epic fantasy books. But like Nancy, I kind of discovered the romance piece of it through fan fiction. Everybody knows I'm a huge Supernatural fan. In in between two of the seasons, it was on hiatus. I needed more stories. I started reading on AO3. I read several hundred stories and then said, I wonder what this Slash stuff is like, and started reading the Slash stuff. Well, that was pretty darn good. And I read several hundred of them. And I came up for air and said, I wonder what the mail stuff that isn't based in a fandom looks like, the published stuff. And so off to Amazon to read several hundred of them, at which point I said, this is just too darn much fun. I got to start doing this. And Morgan Brice was born. And
we brought you over to the dark side.
Brought me over to the dark side. Well, growing up, my mom read Barbara Cartland and Georgette Heyer. And those are, two great writers who have made a huge mark in romance. They just didn't do it for me, at least not at 14. I haven't gone back and tried to revisit, but that was her jam. And so I didn't think I would get into romance, but I loved, when I got into reading the male romance, there was just a lot of stuff that I loved about it and just kind of found a niche there. So everybody finds a place. What do you think is the most?
Gail, I still think about who else said they read Trixie Belden. I remember
Me.
all the couples from Trixie
Yes.
Belden. Jim,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and he was
Yes.
brother to Honey. And I mean, so I go back when you say, you're right. I have coupled up people all the way back to Trixie Belden and that's what I remember so much from those stories. So I guess, good heavens, how old was I? Grade school reading those? So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I'm agreeing with you on the couple thing.
Well, I was huge reading Nancy Drew as well. And like you said, Trixie Belden and Meg and all of those. But, Nancy had Ned. Looking back, I kind of suspect that George and Bess were probably together. I just didn't see it at the time.
They were cousins.
Yes,
Do you
right.
remember that
They
they're
were
cousins?
Yes.
They are cousins.
Oh, up the stakes.
Anyhow, what is the most surprising thing that you have found about writing romance or being a romance author? Nancy, I'm going to pick on you.
I was not fully prepared for the snotty attitude that some people have, like Cynthia mentioned, her colleague. The first time I gave a talk to a class, and it was a general writing talk at that point, but I did open by mentioning that romance sold more than any other genre, because I went through science fiction, mystery, and all that too, but I was going top to bottom in terms of money. And I barely got through that sentence, and a student in the back said, "That's just because you women like your porn." Oof. In class. And I thought, well, if that's the way we're going to be, fine. And I said, "Have you actually read a romance?" And he kind of hesitated and he said, "Well, I've read I've read parts of one." And I said, "Well, if you've read parts of something, you don't really understand it." And this was right after The Bridges of Madison County had come out. Mm-hmm. And, I haven't read the book and I'm not trying to diss it, but it bothered me that The Bridges of Madison County, which is ships passing in the night, and there again, I'm not dissing that kind of story. A lot of people like that story and that's fine, but that's considered great literature, while two people trying to overcome their emotional baggage to form a committed relationship is trash. That's just not acceptable to me. And when I've had people say, "Oh, you write those trashy books," that's what I say. I say, I don't see anything trashy about two people trying to overcome their baggage to form a committed relationship. What about it do you think is trashy? And then they don't know how to answer that. They didn't expect to be put on the spot. They expect romance writers to just curl up and snivel, which means they spend no time whatsoever on Twitter paying attention to Romancelandia, because we will come for you if you give us trouble. So that was really the most surprising thing to me. It wasn't the craft so much as it was people's attitudes toward it. It's like, you know, and Julie to tell, I think her actual last name may be Anderson, and she taught at Duke, and she wrote some articles about romance and women's culture and being a manifestation of women's interests that were really interesting. And, you know, I don't know if those articles are still available anymore, but I could really do a soapbox thing here. So I'm going to stop and let somebody else talk.
How about you, Jeannie?
Oh gosh, the most surprising thing, what Nancy said, that did kind of surprise me and shock me, because like I said, I grew up in this household that basically revered books. So I was like, it's a book. Somebody put a lot of time and energy in. The surprising thing though, I think, other than that, is the assumption some people seem to have that you have done all these things. So
Yeah.
my husband at his office, his department, when my first book came out from Kensington, they had a little party for me and had a book signing, which I thought was great. And it was wonderful. And I sold some books and everybody was very nice about it. And so this guy, big burly guy, he came in and he bought a book. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to buy this for my wife, you know." So my husband came to me a couple of weeks later and he's laughing so hard, tears are just running down his face. And he said, "I'm sorry, I got to tell you," I'll call him Bruce for security reasons. He said, "Bruce came to my office," and my husband was the CFO. So he came to my office and he asked if he shut the door. And I'm like, "Sure, of course, come on in, you know, shut the door." And he said, "What can I do to help you?" And he said, "I just got to tell you, man, you're a lucky, lucky man. I read your wife's book. You're a lucky, lucky man." So I'm like, does he think we go around with guns chasing bad guys? He's like, "No, I think it's the other parts he assumes that we do." Okay. And I've had that on more than one occasion where someone says, very seriously, now there's some snark, there's always the snark, right? But every now and again, there's someone who seriously wants to know, "I mean, how do you do your research for that part?" Imagination. So that to me, I guess, has been one of the oddest and funniest things.
Jenny?
I forced my husband to practice the sex scenes with me. He is a happy man. For me, I knew the attitudes towards romance and science fiction, as in the Alien series I'm doing, you know, the evil combination of both. So I already knew that there were going to be people that would sneer. So that didn't, I mean, you know, like I was raised by them. And believe me, my mother and grandmother wanted me to read everything under the sun, just not pulp trash, which they defined as romance novels and Westerns. And so what surprised me in a very positive way were the romance fans. I had no idea. Touched by an Alien, which is the first book in the Alien series, came out in April 2010. And I had no idea what to expect. I did not know what was going to go on. And there were so many romance review blogs at the time, and they just embraced it. And it was, you know, I was like, I thank God every day for the romance bloggers, because they really took my book and helped make it successful because they enjoyed the romance. Now, the other thing though that was surprising is that this series follows the same characters and it is a first-person series. So what happened by about book 4 or 5, I lost a lot of those romance readers, and I knew I was going to by the time I got there, because I wasn't giving them the meat and the first love drug anymore. Now it's the committed relationship, and other characters are getting their meet and first love. But unless Kitty is sitting in the bedroom with them, which she's not, you're not going to see all of that stuff. And so they were wonderful and very dedicated for the first, first 4 books. And then after that, they sort of died out. Now the omnivores still stayed, but it was at the first, it was surprising. Because when some of them deserted me, I was like, I was betrayed. And then I realized, oh, wait, I'm not giving them the drug of choice. And I get it. And that's okay. I can give it to them somewhere else. Someone else can give that to them. They were there when I needed them. And that was A-okay by me. So they were the big surprise, and in a very positive way for the most part.
How about you, Cynthia?
The perception that we've talked about that people have about romance can really be a double-edged sword. I had a friend who was a romance writer, and notice the past tense was a romance writer, getting a very nasty divorce. And on the seat during her ex-husband's lawyer quizzed her up and down about her romance novels. Now, they were erotic. And they basically accused her of doing all the stuff in the book type thing. And, she made the comment of, y'all don't question when someone like Nora Roberts kills a bunch of people. You don't say, really? I bet she really went and killed those people so she could find out what it was like. And she said, of course not. I didn't do these things. And so I think that it can really hurt you too when people have such misconstrued notions about what we do for research. I mean, that's all very true. But back to what you were saying, Jeannie, about the couple that was married, and I've watched what Nora has done with J.D. Robb and Dallas and Rourke, and what are they on book 40 something by now? And I think
she's almost to 50.
Is she almost to 50 now? I don't know. I've lost count, but I know that's for a lot of people when she lost some people, I think, when they finally got together and it became an established relationship, then it became more of a police procedural than a romantic suspense, which is kind of sad because I'm like you, Gail, the Heart to Heart series. I love series. I love married couples solving crimes and things like that. So I think, but the one thing that really surprised me was the first time I met a fan who burst into tears. And that's weird. That was like, okay, yeah. Fans, I'm not used to having people recognize me, and that flips me out a little bit when they know who I am. And y'all know what I'm talking about. You've all experienced it. So that's the surprising side of it too, I think.
Ange?
Yeah, like I said before, I wasn't really surprised about people's perceptions because that was what had stopped me for so long. I don't really know, like, I guess one of the biggest things that I don't know if it really surprised me, I kind of figured it would be an issue, but makes me chuckle is I sent out a bunch of copies of my first novel for reviews, and I got the same 2 comments all the time, which was either not enough sex or too much sex. Like, I don't really know what to do with that about the same book, but that was my kind of, yeah. So I really don't know what to do with the next one. I might add another sex scene and see what happens. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
I anticipated the stigma from some corners about romance because there is also stigma about writing fantasy and sword and sorcery and pretty much everything that isn't literary fiction, which is usually about really unhappy people in the real world being really unhappy, which has never held an attraction to me, no matter how well written. I like escapism, and that's what I try to provide in my books, whether they're romance or not, is escapism. You're going to get a happy ending, even in my non-romance, because that's just what I do. Why would you read something to make yourself miserable? I think the surprising thing is, though, in all the Gail and Larry stuff that we've written, sure, people have relationships, but there was never any on-page sex. And getting yourself comfortable talking about things very frankly and matter-of-factly, especially if you didn't have maybe the most forthcoming upbringing to talk about these things, has been oddly liberating at this point in my life, because I refuse to think of it as taboo. Like Nancy said, these are two people who are coming to love each other in every way, and there's nothing dirty, bad, wrong about that. And honestly, if you can't say it, you shouldn't do it. And so I fight back against this perception that if a book has sex in it, it's porn or it's smut. That makes me really angry when people say that, because that's bringing a whole lot of negative baggage to the whole idea of two people being in every way that doesn't need to be there. And I don't think of the books that I write, even when they do have, and they do have very explicit sex scenes in them for the Morgan Brice stuff. That's two people showing each other how much they love each other. That's not pointless or there for just amusement. It furthers the plot. So I think that's been kind of the big surprise. Is still some of those attitudes around that, and having to transcend the upbringing. Well, folks, we are out of time, believe it or not. So let's go around again and let everybody know where we can find you online. And if you've got a new release coming up or a recent release, by all means, let us know. Nancy?
You can find me at nancynorthcott.com and on Twitter, where I spend far more time than is good for me, and I'm at Nancy Northcott. The everything on the set of 4 will be available by the time you see this, except Worth the Wait, and that will be available in May. And it's a small town romance with a little bit of drug smuggling, and involves a spy burned out and going home for vacation, and it's a second chance at love story.
Cool. Jeannie?
You can find me at jeanneadams.com and on most social media. And like Nancy, I spend way too much time on Twitter. I don't have anything forthcoming until summer, so I will wait for a hot off the press for that one. But you can find me here on Continual all the time.
This is true. Jenny? Pretty kitty.
Yeah, this is His Highness Lord Evil, who has been screaming at me that I have ignored him too long. Let's see, you can find me on Facebook. I'm all over the place on Facebook, Twitter at Ginny Koch, my website, www.ginnykoch.com. I do have a newsletter, Hook Me Up, which you can join either from one of my Facebook pages or instructions are on the website for how to do that. I'm also on Pinterest and Goodreads and all the other places. New releases for those keeping score. Yes, I'm working on the rewrite of Aliens Like Us. No, it's not done yet. Yes, it will be. Yes, it will be done in our lifetimes. Hopefully sooner than as opposed to later. I do have short story releases coming out in several anthologies with me writing as Anita Ensall, and Derelict comes out in July. The Reinvented Heart comes out later in the year, and Gunfight at Europa Station from Bain comes out later this year too. And all of those have short stories written in my Belters universe, which is set in the asteroid belt of many hundred years in the future. And they all have science fiction with romance in them. So please check those out. You can find out all about releases and such off of my website.
Cool. Cynthia?
Website, cynthiadalba.com. Take out the apostrophe, and I'm everywhere. CYNTHIADALBA. Just run it all together. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. Way too much on both of those. I am on Instagram, some, not a lot. Pinterest, I cannot figure out how to use it to my advantage, so I don't ever go there. And I also have a newsletter. You can find that on my website. I do have book sale going on. This is April that we're recording this. The book sale starts on April the 9th and runs about 9 or 10 days. So check it out on whatever your favorite online bookstore would be, and it's all the hot sale books. So check those out. And I'm doing 2 more of those. They'll be out later this year. I'm like Jenny, I'll wait as we get closer to that. And then I'm going to go back and write some cowboys. So once I get those done.
Very nice. Angela?
You can find me at angelabreen.club. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you can get a couple of free chapters of What's in a Name, which are not included on the Look Inside on Amazon. So you can give that a try. And I'm hoping to have another book out this summer, but like Jeannie, I'm going to wait to announce it.
Cool. Well, I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com and morganbrice.com. If you use those names and, like Cynthia said, run them together, you can find me on pretty much all the social media. I'm on Facebook a lot. As far as new things coming out, I'm in the Fables Retold collection, which is 6 full-length books, about 1,400 pages, and they are all retelling of classic fairy tales with a male romance twist. Mine is the 3 Billy Goats Gruff, and it's got a Tennessee fainting goat, and hijinks ensue, as well as Baphomet. It's a love story. So check that out. That comes out at the end of April. And then Haven, which is the 12th book in the Magic Emporium series, which is multi-author. Each book is a standalone, but they've got a shared trope that everybody used, which is the Magic Emporium. Mine is the last in that series. It's set in my Fox Hollow world, and it comes out April 8th. So, and that is more of a paranormal romance mystery. And so it's also set in the Adirondacks. And of course, I'm always here on Continual. Well, folks, thank you very, very much for being with us tonight and talking about love and romance. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be a lot more romance coming up here on Continual, so we'll see you online.